It is Thursday morning, and it is 10 o'clock, and it is Lancaster Woodturners Weekly Coffee Hour number 115, if you can believe it. I see most of you guys I recognize here, most of you men and women I recognize here. Well, it's all men so far today, from previous weeks, which is all really nice. And we continue to attract some new people as we go. Let me see. I'm just going to report on a couple things that are going on that might concern some of you or be of interest to some of you. We reached a good place in our discussions with the Mid-Atlantic Symposium. We're going to try and create a Zoom experience out of it. And we're going over there this afternoon to test out all the equipment and see if we can establish our own Wi-Fi hotspot and all log into it with multiple phones and like that. So that'll be a big breakthrough if we can get all that to work. If we can get all that to work, we can make a Zoom call work almost anywhere. And we've also realized that, there's two parts of that. One guy has to work the Zoom, which is like I'm doing, but somebody else has to work the room, because what we're really trying to do is get the people to talk to each other. Fortunately, I have a very personable wife who's a retired art dealer, and there's no one I know who's better at working a room. So she's going to do that half. She'll flirt with all you all and try and drag you into the Zoom call. So that's going to be the game we're going to play. We also did a Zoom test yesterday to try and see if we could bring one Zoom into another Zoom so that we could show Lander's upcoming demo, which is a 2-club deal with only a single log on. It failed quite miserably on a number of counts, but it was a very interesting experiment. We had 2 Zoom accounts going, and we called into one, and then we tried to pipe that one into one of them so that we could, it was one of those absolutely... the audio didn't work, and the picture was like we had a share screen inside a share screen, and it was pretty weird, but it was a good experiment. So that's just to let you know that all the experiments are ongoing. And along with that, I probably ought to let you know also that I learned from Baker the other day that AAW has decided to try and establish an audio-video Zoom committee to try and sort this out on behalf of all clubs. As we've been waiting for them to do that for 2.5 years, I'm not going to hold my breath, but I'm glad at any progress on that front. Meanwhile, the hybrid clubs are going ahead on their own. We're going to have our 5th hybrid forum on Monday night upcoming. We've got 140 or so people on our exclusive little mailing list representing 90 clubs, and that's a full, almost a quarter of the total. It's more than a quarter of but it's almost a third of the available clubs are either doing hybrid meetings or trying to figure out how to do it. Bowman did pose an interesting thing the other day. He said, well, with all the trouble of doing hybrid, why don't we just do Zoom meetings and forget about trying to do them as hybrid style? But I think the reason is we still want to get together. We still want to say hi to each other. We still want to pick the piece of wood up. We just can't always get there all the time. So what this does is give us an added dimension, a way of participating remotely, even though we might rather be there physically. I don't think people are going to want to give up physically getting together. I don't see a whole lot of push for that. It's convenient and as easy as these Zoom things are.
John,
Yeah.
One of the things I thought after I made that comment, I usually have to think about my comments after I make them.
Yeah, I know.
Why don't we have 2 meetings a month? One is Zoom and one is in person. Don't try to mix them. And then if you want to go twice, or just...
Well, that's a topic I'd like you to bring or join in on the Monday night thing, because one of the things we're going to discuss there is we're going to open a discussion of the different formats that clubs are using. One club I recently spoke with has 2 meetings a month. One's a meeting and one's a demo meeting. So the demo meeting might be more likely to be remote, but the show and tell meeting, more people might like to come and have a cup of coffee and touch the work. So there's lots of things like that being tried around the clubs, and that's the one thing that the AAW as an organization could do is survey all of that and bring it together so we would actually know what's going on. Right now we're stuck with just working anecdotally and asking people and keeping track and just getting to know a lot of people, and that works only up to a point. I keep hearing about clubs with unusual meeting setups, elaborate meeting setups. I recently learned of a club somewhere, I think it's in St. Louis, that is really 5 clubs in one that uses an enormous meeting hall and multiple cameras and ATEMs, and they've got a guy there who knows how to do it. It's all very interesting. It's the best I can say. And that's part of the topic of this, because we did set this thing up in the first place to learn how to use Zoom, and you look where it's got us 115 coffee hours later. But really what we figured out very early on is we didn't really want to talk about Zoom. We wanted to talk about wood turning. So we're going to go to that now. we're going to use raise hand as usual, but we have some guys lined up this morning too. And I'm going to like to start off with Barry because he's got a really nice looking jig, another jig he's rigged up it'll be a fairly brief presentation. And then we'll go to Bowman and we'll talk about coring for a while. And I see Bouder's up there. So any of you who've got a lot to say about coring, get your equipment ready or your rememberings ready or whatever. And I'm going to switch over to Barry right now. Barry?
Okay, I'm going to be presenting a large steady rest that is not unique. You can probably buy a metal version of it. Mine is, all my jigs pretty much are so that they can be reproduced in somebody's shop, are all made of wood and regularly available material and don't require special metal cutting machinery. So I'll go ahead and share here.
You're up.
Okay, do you all have that image?
We got it now.
Okay, what you're looking at is, as far as the design, I chose a triangular design. I love triangular anything. It's a perfect shape for steadiness, for stiffness, not just for steady rest, but pretty much building blocks of the universe, if you will. And this one has a capacity of, it looks so ungainly because it will handle about a 12.5-inch diameter turned object. And the bottom end, you're limited to pretty much to where the rubber wheels become tangent to each other. So it's got about a 2.5-inch minimum diameter. What I have in there right now is a 7-inch diameter vase slash urn. It's about it will be about 11 inches deep when it's all done. The construction is all, the arms are cherry just because it's plentiful wood. The corner braces are 1/2-inch Baltic birch plywood, sandwiching both sides. And then the tongues that the wheels mount on that are slid in and out are made, in this case, from white birch. The wheels are available from Amazon and a bunch of places. They come as a 4-wheel set as a replacement for inline skating. My recommendation is to use the highest hardness rating. I believe these are an 85A rated rubber in the tires. Just the harder the rubber is, the less it's going to permit vibration and chatter marks on the inside of the work. They're on a 3/8 shaft. So they're quite strong, and it really balances things out nicely. I ran it at about 920 RPM, which makes the tires turn about maybe 25, 27 miles an hour. So it's not in danger of throwing an axle or something.
Barry, do the tires leave any mark on the workpiece?
I'm sorry?
Do the tires leave any marks on the workpiece?
No, they don't. And a big concern I had was, well, you're seeing it right here. The tires are sitting on a constant diameter. And so there is no tendency to make it climb downhill, if you will, like when you put them against a taper. And that was a concern that I had. But later on, I did mount them where it's tapering on down from its maximum diameter, and it's along about an 8 or 10 degree slope. And the tires did not tend to pull away from the work or to pull downhill or come out of a line in any way. I was very happy with how it performed.
What's your mounting mechanism to the lathe ways?
Well, you can see there's a fairly significant amount of pieces of wood there too. I wanted the piece of cherry that bridges across the bed to be stiffened very hard to make the base of it quite rigid. And so it just, there's a 1/2-inch carriage bolt going down through the bed, tightening onto a wooden nut that fits under the bedway and permits it to be slid and you just slide it in place with the wheels out of the way, drawn back. And then once you get it over your target, bring them in one at a time. And I find that there is no need to preload the tire. You just have to bring it in contact. And it worked quite well. We'll see it in motion in a video at the end of this. I have 3 pictures and then a video. This is a segmented turning. It's this month's club turning is something that's segmented. And so I'm messing around here with Purple Heart and Wingy wood, which I would not normally turn Wingy as a solid object just because it tears out so badly, but because with segmented rings, you can always have the grain lined up, circumferentially. It turns very neatly. And in this example, it starts off with 1/16 inch thick Purple Heart and 1 inch thick Wingy. And then each layer, the Purple Heart gets thicker and the Wingy gets thinner, so that at the top end, and there are still 4 more rows to be put on here. At the top end, it's all Purple Heart. So it's kind of like a coarse optical transition from all Purple Heart to all Wingy. And here's a close-up of a detail on the corner. It's just the brackets had been glued on and then stapled. And I put them so that it was a very snug fit on the shaft that mounts the wheel. And then kind of sanded each one to where it would slide without any lateral motion. I don't think it's terribly important that you not have lateral motion as long as you don't reverse direction of rotation while you're running it. And finally, there's a video of it. The reason I like the triangle here is the forces that might be generated all load directly into the vertex of the triangle.
I'm surprised you don't have some need to support the top of the triangle up there. Like, that it needs some kind of bracing in the direction of the latheways.
It's with the corners all being glued and such, it's extremely stable. Triangles are hard to move.
I can see that. I mean, that's an excellent demo there.
You just turn the sound on there.
Wow.
That's a short video, but it was, like I say, I'm running at about 920 RPM there. And I don't know how commercial ones get around making the wood. Whenever you do a segmented turning, because it is essentially pre-hollowed, you can't do like you do with the bowl where you're working down the opening of the mouth and you're going down sequentially deeper. So it starts off, you're already in a bell mouth situation. And so you get to the center of gyration, if you will, and it starts to sing. In this case, about 1.5 inches, right about where I had the wheels, about 1.5 inches in from the mouth. Whenever your tool got near there, you got like a 2000 hertz ringing tone that can be distracting. And if you examine the work after you're all done, you can see there is a real fine chatter pattern in all those areas where you had ringing. And so you really have to, after you do that first turning, maybe move the steady rest 1 inch or so away from that spot so you can true up the chatter marks where it was ringing earlier.
Questions for Barry, comments for Barry. I would applaud that jig. That's a terrific piece you made.
Barry, I'm assuming you don't do hollowing for hollow forms with the laser.
You're assuming I don't.
Do hollow forms using a laser designator on it because it looks like that would block it. I'm curious of what the solution is if you're using a hollowing rig with an overhead laser shining on the outside of your piece, or a camera if you're using that camera approach.
Yeah, that's correct. I don't know of any, I'm sure there may, but I don't know of a three-wheeled, one that supports all the way around that does permit either the camera or the laser to penetrate beyond the tool. I guess it actually could if you'd have it, if you'd have the triangle oriented 60 degrees from how it is, or 30 degrees, so that the gap is where the probe might want to fit through the laser or whatever. You could accomplish it, but no, I don't. I don't do hollowing with any kind of stabilizer thing. I don't do much hollowing, period. But when I do, it's never more than about 5 or 6 inches, and I just get by with toughing it out and taking small cuts at a time.
More questions for Barry? Comments for Barry? I wish, Barry, sometime you'd give a lecture on your jig making techniques themselves. I mean, the way you use staples and plates and triangles and bolts and get smooth fits and all that is really quite beyond what most of us know how to do.
Hey, Barry, so what?
You can take the boy out of the engineer, but you can't take the engineer out of the boy. At least the boy.
So Barry, when you're talking about that the howling that's happening, I believe that is probably the natural frequency resonance of the wood and at whatever turning speed you happen to be at. One thing that I can remember from industry, to detune it, you add mass, and it doesn't have to be much mass. And what I've done on some woods that have been a little bit squeaky is I just wrapped a layer of duct tape around it, and that was enough to hold the fibers to keep them away from their natural frequency. And it's a simple fix, and it's just something just to get rid of that natural harmonic resonance. When you get to that point, every piece of equipment will do it, and it's always different. But on wood, all you need to do is detune it. So basically, the tape just acted like a buffer. I mean, just something simple. I had to try something, so I tried it, and it worked. And when you take the tape off, there's no big deal.
And I was able to get beyond the self-amplifying resonance by instead of running, I did it all at like 920, and then I did with a scraper, a Sorby scraper, ran it on down to about 450.
Yep, that changes the natural frequency. Yep.
It still had some noise, but it was at a duller tone, and it didn't cause
as much,
chatter marks. Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, you have to fool with it, and I'm sure if I had more experience on hollow turning, I would know how to do that automatically. But I am I'm pretty familiar with resonance in wood and other things, and it's always there to haunt you.
Yeah, we used to deal with it in high-speed compressors in metal, and you'd get to a natural frequency, and the piping would fall off the compressor, and all we did was added about 2 pounds in a specific location, and everything went quiet. And the engineer at the time just said, "Yeah, all you got to do is detune it to some frequency that you'll never lock into, and you're good. But if you ever get there, the pipe will fall off again."
Well, that's the same thing with lathes bouncing around with heavy pieces on them too. You get a resonant frequency there where the lathe starts to vibrate and shake and dance across the floor.
That was about 4 or 5 RPM was one log I had on, so I don't know if that was natural frequency. It was just too much weight off center.
Barry, was it chatter marks left, or was it something that could have been sanded out carefully?
They could have been sanded out. They were, I would say, from the height to the valley, from the peak to the valley on a chatter mark, it was no more than maybe it was well under a 32nd of an inch. But on running your hand around the inside, it was a disturbance from you. You know, you're trying to work to where it feels nice. So if some other wood turner inspects it, they don't notice it. You know, nobody else notices that stuff. But if I show it to a wood turner, almost like a monkey in a coconut, they can't resist putting their hand inside it as far as their fingers will go and feel, well, where did you give up on smoothing it out?
Exactly.
And of course, with segment and turning, there's no excuse for not having it smooth all the way to the base and highly finished. You know, so I'm going to finish this inside before I glue the last 4 or 5 layers on, so that when someone looks inside, they can do it with a freaking mirror and a flashlight, and they're not going to see anything unusual. I don't want to hear anybody say, "Oh, I see you got some shadow marks down there at the ring."
What we call wood turning proctologists.
You're right. That's a good term right there.
Well, on that note, we're going to go to a different kind of wood turning proctology. Bowman's got a movie about coring that we made at Doug's shop the other day. This was an interesting project. Bowman wanted to learn coring, and Doug has a rig, so he went over to learn it, and I went along with my phone and I just started taking pictures. And then Bowman says, "Well, you're going to edit this into a movie, are you?" And I said, "Well, maybe you will," and he did. So here we go.
Hey, you all probably have turned bowls, big ones, and go, all that stuff goes on the floor, and it might have been good wood. Well, I went over to Doug's and I saved that wood and brought it back to the shop. Let me show you that I put in the chat. I made an 18-minute video, believe it or not, of Doug and I chatting as old buddies, and him showing me how coring works with the McNaughton product. And
Jim,
then,
could I interrupt with a disclaimer beforehand?
Yeah, Doug.
This is Doug. I just wanted to say that the catalpa Jim handed me as a piece is a bitch to core. So I just wanted to, because it's so soft. So it wouldn't have been my prime choice as a video target. But anyway, we got something out of it. That's the main thing.
I went on my wood pile, which I had organized recently, and I grabbed some catalpa that literally Doug and I had cut at the Conestoga House in Lancaster in 1918. It was on my wood pile, and it's not
2018, Jim. 2018. Come on.
What did I say? 20? I mean,
you said 1918, and I thought
2018. Well, anyways, I grabbed it because I said, well, this is a learning experience. Let's not really, and I did put some nice pieces in, but Doug let me choose the catalpa, so it was a learning experience. Okay, video. Enough of yammer about that. I think I set it up enough. Oh, and then I cut, John says, hey, and I thought too, you can't show 18 minutes on Coffee Hour. And he said, Jim, you got to turn down the 12. And I go, holy cow, you got to chop out 6 minutes. I'm an old editor and I hated that. But I got it down to 10 and a half, and I think it's a pretty darn good video. Here we go. All right, John, I will have to make sure I turn all the things on that I need. And then we'll share this. All right, folks, here we go, 10 minutes.
Are you going to core from this side or that side?
What I normally do is I mount on this point here and core out from there. So
That's what I thought you would.
I take the small one first. That's still the tool I started
That's
with.
good because it's wider here. Yeah. The cutting edge is here, but it cuts wide so that it gives clearance for the arm as it comes in.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you would bind right away.
This one here, the McNaughton
actually welded on.
They've welded on a carbide tip onto the end of that. So it's just, the basic steel is here, and then it's a carbide tip on the end. You take a look at it this side.
Yeah, that's all you got to work with.
Get.
That's all you're going to get.
Exactly.
So 6 inches or something.
So the problem is with this one here, the pith is off center. Because I'm going to put a spur on this side, then when I get down, then I can put a tenon on the back side.
Gotcha.
And then going at it and finding the center on the other side is just a matter of eyeballing it. There's a problem with catalpa is it's really soft. It's breaking up the spur.
I know, I'm sure.
This is designed for their 3 tool sizes, okay?
Right.
This is the mid-sized tool as opposed to the super big size tool. And so it rests down, so that goes on the top. Once you've decided the tool you want, and I've got a couple of tools here.
Oh, okay. This is the small one,
To set
and that's the larger one. Okay.
what you try and do is set your tool height so that it's dead center
Yep,
when you're in the middle.
yep, yep.
And the problem I've got is you'll notice that this is not necessarily dead flat, okay? So if I try and get it on center out here, it's not on center in the middle.
When it gets in there.
When it gets in the middle, and it's really getting in center in the middle. It won't go quite to the middle, but it needs to be on center to get into the middle. The other thing I've got here is for a small shape. This is in the way.
So you take it out without that puppy there?
I normally don't have this in place. The most important part is when you decide where you're going to go in,
Yes.
for their example, is you just got to make sure the tool follows this shape when you're turning. So if I turn this on now, and we'll see how good the temper is. There's one done.
Yeah, and it's like you thought it would. It snapped right off on that grain.
Yep. Well, that's okay at that point in time.
Oh,
They're
sure.
all going to
Yeah.
snap off at that part.
Right, yeah.
Now I can do a second one with this tool if I want to. Move back, choose my spot. Oh, that actually came in quite easy, so why don't we just,
And now you know where center is too.
yeah. No, let's just,
Yeah, this is pretty rough. You're going to have to leave it pretty wide, Doug, I think.
yeah.
Because it's going to take a bit of turning down to get it smooth.
Yeah, that's the point. So,
Hey. You
we'll
want to try for 2 more?
Yep, we'll just try it. Notice when I'm turning this on, I'm trying to make sure I keep the pressure straight in on the tool, not pushing straight in here. I'm trying to make sure when I turn that I'm pushing down and towards the back, if you follow my drift.
So when you push, it's down?
No, it's
Straight in.
It's not. It's a curve push because
Okay.
what you're trying to do is make sure that this tool is going into the groove, right, and following the groove.
So
all
you
the time.
do that by pulling this
Yeah.
a bit
So,
laterally.
I'll try and show you again. So the pressure is going down, but what I'm doing is watching this curve in.
Yeah.
So that even though I'm pushing in, I'm using the handle to bring it around. Smell like burning it a bit. Can you smell that burning? well, you got lots of work to do on the bottom of that. It's going to be thinner.
Yeah. No, I think yeah. I think right away I'm just going to lose that.
Yeah. Well, what I
and I'm just trying to figure.
What I've done sometimes is I take, because it's thin, and this is Catalpa. I'm not going to be able to get it any better than that.
No, I know.
But if I mount this and put a center line there,
right,
and put that around, then what I do after that is take a piece of wood, put that on the center, and then put hot wax.
Okay.
Or hot glue, I'm sorry.
Hot glue.
Hot glued on.
Yeah.
And then you can do the inside, and then you can get it as thin as you want.
Yeah.
With that, as long as you do the outside first and finish.
As you know, I'm not a big guy in thin, so.
I got a huge amount of depth there, so I can go down quite deep.
Yes.
On this next bowl, because there's only going to be one more core out of it. So
so you can regulate how deep you go. I mean, you're not stuck to this, because there is some play. There is some play in here that you can like go deeper for this.
Well, the thing that happens is that you see that's the shape. Yes. That's the shape of the thing, right? Right. But that was determined by how I started it. So if I wanted to go deeper, I'd have to start more on an out part angle, so you're going in deeper to start with. And
gotcha.
That'll get you deeper down in the angle before it finishes off. The problem is if you go, after a while, this ended up almost parallel there, right?
Right. Yep.
If you go deeper, you're just going to cut into the bottom anyway, so it doesn't matter. So this smaller. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, the bottom is a little. This one is a little. Well, no, I was going to say it follows the arc, but it looks like it still does. I thought maybe it went flat a little bit. Okay, so it's where you put it here that really affects it.
Well, it's really the angle that you start with is how deep it goes.
Okay.
Gotcha. And the problem I've got is that that's where you change the tool size. Yep. But you can change the depth or the angle, because now you can you could make a very wide, shallow bowl with this one here, because you can go in and you can see,
pop it out.
See that? If I'd started out here to start with,
but then we wouldn't have a blank left here. Turn it over, Doug. Thank you. So there you have it.
Great little movie.
Yeah, there you have it.
Questions for these guys?
I always thought you had to turn green. I didn't realize you could turn after it was dry.
Well, it's like anything else. If you turn it dry, the chances for me is that if I turn it dry, you might get a bit more friction and a lot of maybe burning if you're not careful. But I haven't seen any problem with it when I turn it dry.
I just want to thank Doug for not letting Jim do any of that on camera.
Can I ask? Did I notice during the beginning of the video that you used a spindle roughing gouge?
Yeah. Yes, the answer is yes.
Yes, in England we would taboo that completely on cross.
That's why Jim showed it.
We scolded him for that. We also scolded him for his chainsaw practices and his crappy face shield. But
Yes.
you know, these guys are these guys. They do what they do.
So you're saying, Jim, you you do use a spindle roughing gouge occasionally on a bowl?
No,
It was
No.
it was Doug.
Never.
I think
Let,
Doug,
let, let me at least defend myself here on this one, if I could. The
Sorry.
issue around a spindle roughing gouge versus a blade like a Ellsworth long blade is the way that you present the edge. It's got, as far as I'm concerned, the shape of the edge. If you've got a swept back gouge versus a spindle roughing gouge, is the same approximate angle. So it's how you present the tool to the piece, and you have to be conscious about that. Obviously, I'm not going to go and do it. And what I sometimes do is if I'm trying to get just the outside corners on a piece, which is close to, you know, a large bowl, they say, well, it's a large diameter. So, okay, well, I'm presenting a blade to the wood. And what matters is the angle of the blade and the angle of the whether you're riding the bevel to the wood. The rest of it is how you hold it.
hey, and Doug, this will be my promotion. I put the longer video link in the chat. And in there, Doug and I have a conversation, and John, I think, joined in on, have a conversation about this very thing. And you might get a clearer understanding.
I'll actually post the longer video as the video that comes out of this. I'll post the longer video and this discussion joined together.
Yeah.
the thing with a roughing gouge, a spindle roughing gouge, is of course the tang is very weak. And if you do catch a catch, and it's happened over here in England, where the actual blade of the tool has come apart from the tang because there's no strength there.
And that's why, if you notice the way I held it,
Yeah,
the force
I'm
of
only
the
picking it
turn.
up, you know,
No,
because
I'm
it's-
agreeing with you. I'm agreeing with
Yeah.
you 100%.
yeah,
But
I
also,
think
I would
it's-
also, can I just finish? I would also say that the reason for the way I hold that tang is to make sure that the force of the cut is down straight onto the tool and not any chance of it coming across where you can bend the tang.
I would
That's-
suggest that it's something that beginners don't try it until they get.
No, I
more
wouldn't,
experience.
I would agree with that 100%, Don, 100%.
Yeah, sorry to pick it up, Doug, but it's something that over here we're very conscious about.
Well, we are too. We are
Yeah.
too. I was alarmed when I saw him pick the tool up, but I appreciate his argument at the same time. You know, it's a real question. What do you do in a video? Do you not show that an expert technique by an expert turner because if a beginner tries it, he's liable to hurt himself, or do you show it in order to show? I mean, what do you do? I don't know the answer.
I think what we've done is right. Doug has explained why, and Doug agrees that it shouldn't be beginners that do it until they're more experienced.
It was interesting. There was a fellow in Australia, Robo, I forget his name, but he's a production wood turner, professional wood turner, and he was demonstrating for his club why you don't use your spindle roughing gouge on a cross grain piece. And as he was demonstrating, and again, this is a professional on a closed course, don't try this at home. He actually got a bad catch and cut himself and got blood on the wood.
Well, there's also, you know, the story, and it's not apocryphal, of the instructor at Worcester Craft Center back, I think, in the 80s, who was gesticulating with a gouge, and it hit the wood, and it bounced on the lathe, and it got him in the middle of the forehead, and down he went for the count. So, you know, we get very casual around the lathe. We lose track of how much kinetic energy is going on there with that lump of wood going around at a high rate of speed.
I can only say from my experience that I was doing I was using a scraper on a bowl, and the handle broke. I had a catch and the handle broke, and the blade of the scraper hit me straight in the middle of the face mask. It was a cheap face mask, like you're saying, but it was nevertheless a face mask, and it saved me from a lot of cuts. So I've had that experience of going apart, and also in industrial, the eyes on task, watching your line of fire, watching all those things is something, as you said, you need to teach an amateur or anybody in wood turning about the safety of it and the way you stay safe when you're doing things, because you can hurt yourself real bad with any chisel, no matter what happens.
Oh,
You know.
absolutely, Doug.
Landers, are you wanting into this conversation? You got your hand up. Toby?
I just wanted to show a few pieces that I have cored.
Okay, we'll come to you once
last
this
week or
one
so.
winds down then, okay?
Yep.
Hey, this whole question is, spindle gouge typically, if I understood it, was used straight in, just like almost like a scraper, wasn't it, on spindle work?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when Doug showed me following the bevel with it, I discovered it's a pretty good cutting tool. And boy, you keep your rest close and you don't let it get anywhere above pointing down. And but
I find you can often turn all of a spindle with a roughing gouge. You're using the flat part, you can use it like a skew, and using the bowl part, you can use it like a gouge. And unless you're making ditzy little shapes, you can rough out a piece for sure.
Well, and it's you really beat yourself up though trying to do it. So the question is, I usually try to turn my blanks round as I can, so I don't have so much of that dancing at the tool rest. But Doug chopped the corners off with his chainsaw, and then we tackled it from there. And so I am slowly trying to, and it's amazing. We should teach ourselves, some of us, how do you smooth down a blank? I remember Ashley said in one of her things, she cuts the corners off for her classes, and she says, well, that's what we have a lathe for, to make it round. Why do we need to use the bandsaw? And I thought, okay, but it's hard work taking corners off.
I bring the actual discussion back to the
Thank
coring.
you, Doug.
Because my comment that wasn't included in that is that I understand that the one-way system runs on a pivot, which is a lot easier to pivot in and around. But the issue for me, difference between that is what I referred to as the flexibility of the McNaughton system with going after wide, shallow bowls. So the fact that you don't have your tool on a pivot, some people would say, well, that really makes it awkward. I would say, yeah, it does change the dynamics of the way you present the tool to the core, but you do have a lot different number of shapes that you can go into. And as far as, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not that familiar with the one-way system.
The one-way, I watched videos, so that's my only claim to fame on it. You have to stop a lot and then eventually put that guide into the groove. It seems like you stop, chisel in, slide it. I thought the McNaughton makes a lot more sense to me. So.
Let's get some more voices in on that. Anybody want to chime in? Barry, do you know about this? Who?
What I want to mention was in November, our demonstration at the Woodturners Club is going to be Angelo Affredi turning, coring by hand with no jig. Just as far as I know, it'll be a straight in, almost like a parting tool. You're gonna do several core pieces out of a single blank without using a jig. So I'm looking forward to it. Just sounds like an interesting demonstration.
Barry, if you want to do the one tool that we didn't show because we cut it out of the long video, is the straight tool they give you, so you can just do a straight in to get a straight edge bowl. I've been tempted to try that without a jig, just like you mentioned, just use a tool and go straight in.
I've done that with a parting tool. I've bent the handle of a parting tool doing that too, or bent the shank right at the handle. Mike Peace, you got your hand up?
Yes, I've been looking at this very closely for the last 6 weeks. I spent two sessions with a fellow in our club who has a one-way, and then he gave me a base that for a smaller lathe than the one I've got, and I'm going to attempt to use it, but I only bought one knife because I don't do really big stuff. But clearly, I think all the experts will agree that the McNaughton is a more flexible system. But like every other tool that has more versatility and more flexibility, it also has a steeper learning curve. So I think it's a function of how often are you going to do this to accept the benefits or the downside of that particular tool. And there's no question that I think that a one-way is a easier system, but it does have limitations on making the adjustment. It's designed pretty much for a hemispherical bowl. You can make some adjustments for a deeper bowl or a shallower bowl, but clearly it's not as flexible. But that arm that Jim was saying, you have to keep adjusting the finger. The benefit of that finger, and you do have to make adjustments, is it supports the tool that prevents it when you do get catches from bending. And we had a fellow that was running a symposium, and he was gathering tools, and one of the tools that he had to gather was a one-way for Glenn Lucas for a demonstration on coring, and he wound up getting 3 one-way sets. Glenn Lucas dismissed 2 of them as being too damaged to use because people that don't pay attention weren't using I'm assuming they weren't using that finger support properly or often enough or deep enough, and they wound up damaging the knives. That was 2 out of 3. So, real men sometimes do have to read instructions.
Landers, you want to try it again?
Well, let's try it again. Am I on now?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I had reconfigured my setup last week and missed one little thing on the audio. Anyway, I wanted to go back to the McNaughton and show you something I did. I don't core up enough to just like stick the knife up there and know where it's going to go in the piece. So what I did was I got a piece of plastic. And I traced, see if we can get it up here. I traced all the knives that I've got on it. And then I can set that up over the piece of wood and kind of see. So I traced the knife and the end of the knife, and then I kind of continued that arc around. So I can set this up over a piece of wood and kind of see, oh, if I use that knife, and I started here, where's it going to go? And then I can kind of get that, because the important thing is the angle of that handle when you start that thing. And I'll set this up on the lathe, and I'll climb up on the bed and kind of look straight down at it, so I get a good view of that. But
Dave, that's a fantastic idea. I tried doing it on paper. I never thought about doing it on plexiglass or something like that. I'm going to go out to my shop and do it immediately, because that's exactly what I was trying to find a good way of doing it.
Yeah, I mean, if you're able to kind of climb up on the, on the lathe and look straight down at it, because what happened to me when I first started coring with the McNaughton is I'd hold the tool up here and kind of do the same thing with the tool and figure out the angle, but I found that I was never holding it straight enough. I was always kind of tilting it, and everything. I made a bunch of funnels like that just because I was holding against the side of the bowl, and that little tilt was just enough to throw it all off. Anyway, thought I'd share that.
Very good tip. Appreciate that. Anybody else want to join this conversation?
I was just wondering, after you've cored it, how do you hold it? You jam chuck it and then put a tenon on the bottom, or how do you complete it?
Well,
depends on the thickness of the wood.
Yeah, the first piece that he kicked out, this one, not the very first one in the trash, the first real core, I sanded the bottom flat on the disc sander and glued it onto a block of wood on a faceplate, turned it, and then knocked it off. And obviously, I didn't even bother putting it in a cold chuck. I just sanded it flat. The second one I put in a cold chuck immediately and turned a recess in the back. Turned the recess, and then I re-chucked it and did the work on it. The big one, and here's where the catalpa got me. Obviously, this is quite flexible. I threw it on a cold chuck and cranked it down because I didn't want to be hit in the face with it. And I managed to crack it a couple places. Good old CA glue left me finish it. But I did the same thing. I put a foot on the bottom, but I took it off. I reversed it and took it off after it's done turning. So there are ways to do it, and I was pleased with either way. I just was experimenting. Obviously, I threw a curve by bringing the junk catalpa to turn. It's very dry, by the way. Yeah.
Can you get a better result with a harder wood like cherry or maple? Can you get?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I've done 5 bowls out of a core with the same diameter, because you can go thinner on the sidewall, and as long as you don't make a funnel out of it, that's the biggest issue on a harder wood is what you're talking about with a funnel, as opposed to the other way around, like Dave is commenting, because you can get the sidewall 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch, or a 1/2 inch thick, and it's easy to do as long as you got the trace right.
So that's how Mahoney does those 7 sets of 7.
Absolutely.
Dave, you got the floor.
Back to the bottom of the bowl question. Once you've cored out one piece, and you've still got that bowl sitting on the lathe that you just cored it from, just flip it around and jam the rim of the bowl into the piece that's still on the lathe, and bring up the tailstock, and then you can work on the bottom really easily. Get rid of that nub and put a tenon on it or something.
Great idea.
Dave, you're right. And I wasn't at Doug's shop anymore. I couldn't do it. We didn't do it. So I had to figure out a way.
Got to do it right away.
No, you're right. And that's a very good technique.
Yeah.
The other approach that I've seen on that first core, instead of taking out a little bitty one, you leave that waste in the middle, and when you've got that blank, the big blank mounted, you put your either a recess or a tenon for that first core. So when that first core comes out, you've already got something to rechuck it with.
Okay. Yep.
Well, does it make any sense to take the big one out and then keep working in? Or, I mean, these guys did it, they started from little and worked out. Is there an argument there, a way of doing it either way?
That's the way I do it. I take the big one first, then work down.
So do you put a new tenon on the bottom of the core every time, Toby?
When you take the first core out, so you have I take it over to the other lathe and just put it between centers and put a tenon on the end of it.
Or like Dave was just saying, you could just reverse it, chuck it back into the hole or whatever. Yeah.
Well, yeah, you could, unless it was a natural edge piece. Yes.
Yeah.
I tend to do natural edge when I do the corings.
How many guys actually do coring enough to say, this is in my repertoire?
I have a full gallery here, so I can tell you the answer to that. If you guys will raise hand, I'll count you. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Come on, Mike, put your hand up.
20% of the
starting.
Group. It's about 20% of the group. I don't do it. I don't intend to, but I still find it pretty interesting to learn about.
Well, one of the issues is you end up with nested bowls. I mean, very similar. And so if you want to play around and have very different ones, I
don't usually have a piece of wood that's perfect enough to do that with. I'm usually able, if I'm going to get one piece out of it, it's a lot. Even when I make nested sets, and I make closely nested sets of bowls, but I make them out of similar blanks of pear wood, so that they're very dissimilar grain anyhow. So I can make them as tight fitting as I want to, but they're not actually out of the same tree, but they're not out of the same block.
Of course, the biggest issue, I think, for a lot of turners is how often are you turning big bowls to justify the cost? If you're only turning a few, who cares about a few extra shavings? Who cares if it takes a little longer to hollow it out with a bowl gouge versus the cost? A one-way system with all 4 sets of knives, and very few people, I think, are going to use that largest set, you're looking at close to $1,000.
Ouch.
How much is McNaughton these days?
It is a little cheaper.
Yeah.
A little. I'm not sure how much, but it is a little cheaper. But of course, there is a trade-off with the one way. You can replace the cutter at a fairly low cost of $40 to $60 or so for whether it's a high-speed steel or a carbide scraper cutter. Whereas as I understand it, McNaughton, you can either send it in and have it retipped at a cost, or many people just buy a new blade. the McNaughton blades are cheaper than the Oneway because the Oneway is more complex system. It's got a post on it. It's got a heavier duty steel. It's machined to hold a cutter. It takes some extra, engineering and preparation, and then it also comes with that support. So it's a two-part system. So each knife is more expensive. You just replace the cutter. So like everything, there's trade-offs.
Hunter makes a new knife rig, but it's 190 bucks.
I've tried that as well. It's called the Car Pro. The biggest expense is that what he calls the cartridge, because there is some machining. There's some grooves where that cutter fits onto the knife like this to keep it stable. So that cartridge has to be machined to fit it. And then after that, you're only replacing a cupped carbide. Those of y'all that are familiar with the Hunter tools, it has a little diamond profile, and those cutters are fairly inexpensive, right. $30 or $35, and they will core something like 30 cores before you have to replace it. And I think that may just be on one half before you reverse it even.
Hey, John, I think Toby, before we get done, Toby, don't you have coring you want to show us? Or is that inappropriate, John?
Well, I got a couple other guys here. Vasco, you got something quick to say, or Bert, or should we go to?
Yeah, I have a quick question. Can you do coring on like a little jet lathe or a grizzly lathe, 1 horsepower? Do you need something a little more powerful?
When I first started coring is because my wife gave me a coring set for Christmas once, and I had a 1 horsepower motor on my lathe. The issue around the coring is that it's just going to, the biggest problem is it's no different in the cut. It's just when it catches. So, you should be able, if you have a small coring system on a smaller lathe, as long as it fits the McNaughton, you can use it.
I've seen that happen, yeah.
Oneway sells one for a 12-inch lathe.
Yeah, that was going to be my comment as well, is that you can use the McNaughton system on a small lathe because they have the micro, the mini, the standard, and the jumbo cutters. And I have all of them. But one thing I do have, I got a Vic Mark 300. It's got a 3 horsepower motor. When you put the micro cutter on a Vic Mark on the smallest one, even on a small bowl, and you have a little bit of a catch, you end up with a real nice can opener, real quick. It's just like a corkscrew. But on the micros or the minis, the standards, and the big ones, it'll stall. I got my belt set so that it'll actually stall and slip on the belt. But with the micro cutters, 3 horsepower motor had enough. They just corkscrewed it. So I don't do a lot of really small stuff, but you can. I started out with a really small 12-inch lathe when my first coring with the McNaughton. I spent a lot of time stopping the motor. The motor just didn't have enough power, so I went to a bigger lathe, and I got lots of power now. But I never use the small cutters anymore on the big lathe because it just corkscrews them.
Well, we're on the hour, but Toby's got some pictures of coring work, right, Toby?
Yes.
Okay, I'd like to see those. So if you guys would like to hang on for a couple minutes, let's look at Toby's pics.
Yeah, it was questioned about, is it worth it for the core? So if you have a cherry burl, this is 15 inches. And out of that one, I got this one, which is about 12 inches and a 10-inch, and then a smaller. Oops.
So how many did you get out of that?
So there's 4 altogether. Normally you would just get 1 if you didn't core. So I got 3 extra bowls like this, and that's
okay,
an
we'll
extra.
deal with that for a second. Let's have a good look at that since we're here. Yeah.
This is the second one.
And you're doing a McNaughton, aren't you, Toby?
No, this is the Oneway.
Oh, it's a Oneway. Okay.
So you can do that kind of burly wood that's fragile and blasted, and you can still get it out without ripping the wood up.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
The natural edge, you just have to start a little slower around here until you get into solid wood. But and there's one. There's one that's fairly shallow. So
now, are you trying to get the maximum number that you can out of the piece? Is that your objective?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Because I'm gonna sell them then. And like I say, that's $300 worth of bowls there that I wouldn't have got if I didn't core it out.
Okay, now there's a reason for doing it if you're trying to make a living at it. That's for sure.
Here are some. here are some other ones that I've dyed. This is maple. That was cherry, the last ones. This is actually the smallest.
Hold still there now. Just hold it still so we can see it. Very cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is the middle bowl.
Very cool.
This one is about 12 inches. And I dyed it, of course. This one was actually supposed to be the biggest bowl, but the outside had kind of an ogee shape. And when I started coring in, the wall, when the ogee shape transitioned, it got down here to was about a 1/16 of an inch.
A proto funnel.
Yeah, so I readjusted it and went down through, but it still had that real short edge up here where it had more bowl. So I just went ahead and cut that off and made a smaller bowl out of it. But this was actually the biggest piece.
So you start on the outside. That I would love to see how you do that sometime.
Yeah, I do the bigger core first, and then smaller, and then smaller.
I'm trying to imagine how that.
Well, I'm thinking we ought to make a video date and go to Toby's place and shoot a little video someday.
You're good at it. You're a good shooter. I'll edit it for you.
Okay, we're on.
And that would be a comparison of the one-way system versus the McNaughton as well for you.
Yeah.
You want for that, Toby? We'll set it up.
Yeah, we could do that someday.
All right. And with that, I'm going to remove the spotlight, get back to a gallery view, and thank you all for another fascinating Woodturners Coffee Hour. We'll see you all next week.
Wood shop. Thank God